Hello, this is Heather Hoffman, and I have a card to share with you today with some layers and vellum and kind of building a fun scene. I'm using the October 2020 Kit of the Month from Unity Stamp Company, and I love just that woody treed scene and then that beautiful image of that girl kind of looking like she's looking back. In this case, in the card, it's going to set up so it looks like she's looking back at the path. I just thought it was a perfect fit to use these two images together. I'm stamping that image on some watercolor paper. I'm using VersaFine, which is watercolor friendly. This is a smoky gray ink, and this is Strathmore watercolor paper that I'm using. I'm lining it all up in my MISTI, which will allow me to stamp that image multiple times to make sure I have a really good impression on that watercolor paper. And then I just did some really simple coloring on here using Daniel Smith watercolors. And it might look as I'm going along like the colors are a little bit too bold, and I just kind of kept building up the color. But as you saw in the finished card, the other image is going to be on vellum over the top. So I purposely wanted to go a little bit too bold in my color choices just because I knew it was going to be softened by that layer of vellum over the top. So I started off with a green, went around and just kind of built that on all the darker spaces on the trees. It kind of looks weird at first because you've got the white areas that are more the snow. And originally I was just going to leave those white, but as I started doing this, I went, no, that doesn't look good at all. So I went down and I got the green all filled in. And then I came in with a little bit of blue to kind of get that icy cold feel. I know it's not necessarily a realistic snowy look per se, but I felt like it blended together better. And it also kind of softened out with the green on there. I had to keep cleaning my brush because I wanted it to blend with the green and kind of soften both of those colors. And I kept getting my brush a little muddied with the green. So I just kind of kept cleaning it off, picking up a little more blue, blending it around. And then when my brush got a little more green than blue, I would just clean it off, get a little more paint, and keep building it around. By working fairly quickly here, most of the colors were still a little bit wet. So it helped all the colors blend a little bit. That far right side you might notice is blending the leaf. So I did come back in and wet it down a little more with some softer green just to kind of build it up. And I just kind of kept dropping color in here and there on different spots and letting those colors blend. I did the path with just a simple neutral, a little bit of brown. Again, realistically, it might have been white and snowy covered, but I needed some way to delineate it. And I just kind of thought, well, if the path was cleared and the snow scraped off to the side, it still has a little bit of light color in there, like a little bit of snow kind of covering some spots, but it's softened off by that little bit of really soft neutral brown. And then I finished off with kind of an unexpected, I don't know why I picked this color. It just kind of looked fun, but it's kind of a yellowy green to fill in around the outside, the sky color, obviously. This is just kind of an imaginary forest, not really realistic colors at all. So just paint it whatever suits your fancy. You could make purple trees if you wanted. All right, I set that aside to dry, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to getting that image of that girl on the vellum. I was going to put it entirely on, and then I decided this vellum panel is trimmed a little bit smaller than my watercolor panel. So I decided to kind of set it off so it's going off the bottom of that piece of vellum. I'm going to heat emboss that image, so I use my embossing buddy on there a little bit just to clear any static or anything off of there. I'm stamping it 2 times with VersaFine in Onyx Black. This is a nice crisp black, and it's also a friendly ink for heat embossing. So I'm going to sprinkle that with clear embossing powder. It's so much easier to stamp in black and heat emboss in clear than to stamp in clear and heat emboss with black, because any little stray powder, if you use black embossing powder, is totally going to be visible and noticeable, where the clear, if you miss a little speck somewhere, you're never even going to see it once you heat emboss. It's just going to turn clear and vanish. So I really love doing it that way. All right, now that that has dried, I'm going to go ahead and get this trimmed down just a little bit more. I already had it smaller than that panel, but I ended up wanting it even smaller still. So I trimmed it down, and then I went off to my sewing machine, thanks to the magic of skipping ahead on a video, and just added kind of a wonky line of stitching along the top. I left those loose threads attached and just trimmed down as well. I kind of like, I feel like that enhances the look of the stitching, leaving a little bit of threads loose as well. And attaching the vellum that way is a really easy way to not have to worry about your adhesive showing. You could also use a stapler or wrap it around the back. Lots of different ways to do that, but the stitching was kind of fun. I'm going to add a sentiment from the kit. I'm heat embossing it on a little bit of black cardstock in white. That's going to really pop against the neutral background as well. And it's kind of a little bit of a contrast, white on the black instead of the black image on the vellum in the background. So I stamped that on there, heat embossed it with white, and then I just trim it down into a nice thin strip. I trimmed fairly close to those words because I didn't want it to cover too much of my scene. And then I'm going to use this to hide a little more adhesive on the vellum. I just kind of set it in place there. I'm going to trim that down, and then I'm going to mount that sentiment with a little bit of foam adhesive. I have some pre-trimmed little strips here that you can get all pre-made like that, which is kind of handy for something like this. I'm going to mount that over the top of the vellum, and then I'm going to carefully pull that up, and right behind that strip, I'm going to add a thin line of adhesive that I can stick down and use that to attach the vellum. I could leave it floating free, but this just makes it a little more stable, and you're never going to see that adhesive behind the sentiment there already. All right, this is a panel of fun foam that I've mounted score tape, the 5-inch wide on. It's a great stable panel to adhere that to my card base and give a little bit of dimension. This whole panel was also slightly smaller than my card base, leaving a little thin border that way, and those threads hanging loose to add some fun texture. Thanks so much for coming by today. I hope you enjoyed and have a wonderful day.